Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Our agenda today is very much in flux because this double floor makes scheduling really difficult. So nothing scheduled this afternoon, but it might not be what we're actually doing this afternoon. So I'm not gonna talk about it right now. But this morning, we are going to hear about the fiscal note on S100. And then ideally vote on S100, and then Commissioner Bolio is going to come in to talk to us about S56 and mostly Abby's language. S56. And so with that, Dan.
Right. I'm going to share my screen. See that will. Okay, so Dan Dickerson with the Joint Fiscal Office. The first thing I want to note up front is Pat Tipton and I collaborated on this note, so I'm focused more on the Act 250 pieces, which I think is probably going to be where you're interested in hearing about. Any other sections of the bill, I think I would have to, or any other sections of the fiscal note, I would have to defer to Pat on, but I can speak to the Act 250 pieces.
Pat took us through the other.
Oh, okay. He was already in here.
Perfect. My understanding is that those are all appropriation sections, and your sections tend to be slightly fee oriented.
Yeah. So the other thing I want to say up front is.
Did you identify yourself in the record?
Yes, I did.
Sorry.
But I do forget that sometimes, so I appreciate you reminding me. So when this bill was working its way through the Senate, I sat down with Sabina Haskell and Peter Gill to sort of get a sense of, here's what the Senate is discussing. Is there any data that you can give me in a realistic amount of time that will allow me to really come up with a firm number for what the revenue loss could be? And they said, it's possible, but it would take us a long time. We have to go through all of our paper files, all of our old permits to get a sense of, okay, if you're going to exempt this amount of housing per project, we'd have to go through each of those permits and identify those. And so I think what they were able to tell me at a high level is sort of, here's our expected revenue. Here's, housing as a percentage of that. Housing tends to be, and they probably came in and told you something sort of similar, but housing tends to be more expensive. So, I think the fiscal note really speaks to that information that they were able to give me, but it does state that the provisions in this bill in sections 16, 16A and 17 would, I think, materially reduce the revenues going to the Act 250 permit fund, but I don't have a sense of what that impact would be. Probably, and I don't know the timing. I mean, this is a 3-year provision. You've gotten a walk through the bill too, so if I sort of jump around a little bit, okay. Because this housing, or at least most of these provisions are sort of on a 3-year basis. I don't know where those impacts would fall, probably more likely in the latter 2 years and not as much so in FY24 as developers sort of ramp up and begin going through the permitting process. So I think there's a possibility that, of the 2.7 million that the Act 250 or the Natural Resources Board would expect next year and probably something close to that over the next few years, those revenues could go down a few $100,000, probably at most. But I don't feel comfortable enough with that number to put it on a fiscal note and sort of have it be, that's the gospel or that's what everybody runs with. So there are the 3 main provisions that, I can walk through those that, I believe would impact the revenues. The first is there's the quote unquote sort of 10-5-5 policy that would now change to 25-5-5 for the next 3 years. So developers would have until June 30th of 2026 to to ask for a jurisdictional opinion, and then they would have until, I believe, 2029 to actually get things built out. So that would most likely result in, some revenue impacts. Although, the other thing that's difficult to tell is how many of these projects would have happened regardless, and how many projects wouldn't happen but for, the General Assembly sort of passing this bill. And I don't have a sense of that either. So I'm afraid I can't be terribly helpful other than identify, here are the areas that, I feel pretty comfortable will have some sort of impact. The other piece here is it expands, under current law, there are identified these priority housing projects. But in order for a PHP to be exempt from Act 250, it has to be in a municipality of 10,000 people or more. And this bill changes that so that it can be any municipality as long as the project is in a downtown district, a neighborhood development area, or a growth center. So it does expand the footprint of where those PHPs could be built and not have to go through Act 250. So probably some impact there, but once again, I don't know how many of those projects would happen anyways, how many would not happen but for. And then finally, there's the master plan permit process, which allows the municipality to go to the Natural Resource Board, ask for sort of this umbrella permit to cover, I believe a downtown area. And then developers can sort of, as long as their project falls within the area of the master plan permit, they can go through sort of a less, I guess I would say less rigorous review process, which probably results in fewer fees being paid. So those are the three main areas of Act 250 that, I believe would result in most likely reduced revenues to the permit fund over the next few years. And then there's this Section 18 that I was told, which just sort of restates the fee ceiling, but in a different area of that statutory section. And from what I heard from the Natural Resource Board, that's just sort of a technical correction. So it won't, it's not going to result in any projects that would have paid higher fees falling under that umbrella. So those are the Act 250 provisions and the provisions that I think would impact revenues to the state.
Do you have any thoughts on any changes in how neighborhood development areas are opened up that might impact sort of future tax credits?
Open like expand the definition to include.
It seems like there was language in there to support communities to get neighborhood development area and downtown designations, which is great. But that might have sort of a future impact on tax credits. Is that something? It's like very 4 steps out.
Yeah, it's certainly possible, but I think timing is an issue here. I think over the next few years, something like that is probably not going to have too much of an impact. But of course, this is different from Act 250. So I think on that, I would have to defer to Pat. But as far as something, if you're expanding neighborhood development areas, that would then be subject to these Act 250 provisions in the bill. I think timing would be critical, and you have to establish an expanded area, and then if there's a project in that area, going through the Act 250 process. And I think 3 years is definitely a tight timeline for all of that to happen, and them to then be exempt from the full permitting process. But as far as tax credits, I think I would. Expanding pressure to receive additional tax credits, I'd have to defer to Pat on that, because that's more his area.
What are the revenues used for in the Act 250 fund, the permit fund?
They fund the Natural Resources Board. Those revenues have not kept up with the need for the board to operate, and so they've also pretty consistently received. I mean, I think they've always received some level of general fund, but I think they've gotten more general fund in recent years. But yes, those fees go into the permit fund, they fund the Natural Resources Board, and then there's a little piece that goes off to A&R because A&R does usually reviews most projects. So that allows them to pay for their costs,
Clean Water doesn't get anything.
not from Act 250 fees, no.
Representative Anthony, do you have your hand up too?
I think my memory tells me that most of the expansion in the eligibility of tax credits, affordable housing credits, are pretty much fully subscribed for every year anyway. And so if there's an expanded area or an expedited overview, they'll still run up against the limit that we have set, unless we are urged to expand it in future fiscal years. So
Yeah, I think that's the pressure is that, there are so many more projects than the tax credit to handle that there would be pressure to increase that cap. But yes, there is a cap in place. So without action of the General Assembly,
it's not going above that.
Thank you.
you're welcome. Yeah, sorry, I can't offer a firmer revenue impact estimate, but I think there's just so much uncertainty. And then, if Congress doesn't act over the next month, who knows what happens to anything at that point. But
Thank you for that.
I'm JFO. I have to come in with depressing fiscal news, right?
Love to see the fiscal note on that.
Yeah. Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that we vote out S-100 with a favorable recommendation.
Second.
Representative Demrow moves that we find S-100 favorable. Seconded. Is there any discussion? Yes.
Madam Chair, what is the story in this committee with voting yes on a bill in committee and reserving our vote, yes or no, on the floor?
I think everyone has a right to vote however they want at all times. And I think it's, for me and my ethics around this, which is, I think, all that's sort of available in this moment. I think in this committee, we're more focused on the fiscal impact and we might have sort of broader concerns about a bill that we don't get to mess with, and so that can be hard sometimes, right? And I think this might be one of those contexts. We don't know what's going to happen next on the bill, but we think it's okay to send it on its way. We might not want it completely. And I think it's kind to our colleagues to not sort of speak publicly against bills that we've voted on in committee.
I would never do that.
Yeah,
But I
that's sort of,
just ask you about the vote.
that's how I feel about it.
Okay.
But that's just my one sharing opinion to you. Yeah.
This bill in particular, we are looking at it at a moment in time. There are still, as at least I understand, additional amendments contemplated that. So it is a little sort of awkward to vote at a moment in time on something that is not necessarily final, but
Thank you.
I, for one, am hopeful that the issue around appeals is addressed as the bill continues to move through the process.
Yeah, thank you. Bill's been a long time coming. It's not perfect. I think there's some to dislike for everybody. But it's a necessary step and I'm fully supportive.
Andrews, yes. Anthony,
Yes.
Beck,
Yes.
Brannigan,
Yes.
Demrow,
Yes.
Maslin,
Yep.
Matos,
Yep.
Bodie,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Canfield,
Yes, reserve my right.
Kornheiser.
Yes, thank you. 12-0-0. Thank you. Representative Demrow is going to report the bill. And it needs to go to the clerk's office. Case now absorption is on the job. Look for an email.
Madam Chair, can you repeat the vote?
Yes, thank you. It was 12-0-0.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. We're going to take a brief stretch.